You everybody for attending. We are going to be talking about bills of materials today. So we all know how important they are, not only for us internally, companies, but also for our customers. But um, this is about as much of a PowerPoint as I'm going to do here today. I want to work with the software. Before we get into bills of materials, I just wanted to step back a little bit and talk about Onshape and really how it works with components. Right now, I'm in what's called a part studio. So a part studio is where I create geometry, and I can create multiple bodies. So I have a body here, I have one up there, I have this overall, and I have like this little O-ring. And we can see them listed over here. These are the 4 bodies that we have. Um, as this being a part studio, this is where I create the geometry. So you'll notice that I have all the commands for creating geometry up here. And this list over here are all the different features that I use to create these things. So this in and of itself isn't an assembly. It is a grouping of bodies. I can take any one of these and make a drawing of it. I can use it in somebody else's assembly. But in the Onshape world, this technically is not an assembly. One of the things you'll notice with this is that there's another space down here for an O-ring, but I only created one. Usually when you are working in a parts studio, you want to create just the unique parts of, in this case, it'll be a sub-assembly, but just the unique parts. And then in the assembly, you create those. I could have created another body here of an O-ring. The thing is when I get to, and it would see these as separate, even though they might have the exact same name, it would see them as separate bodies. In a bill of material, they'd be 2 line items. And really, I just want 1 line item with 2 of these guys in it. So what we do is we create an assembly. So I'll take a look at the assembly of this guy. You notice that it's exactly the same, except there are 2 O-rings. So all I did is I brought in that part studio, and I said, now assemble in the extra O-ring and put him here on the bottom. So now I have 2 of those O-rings. You notice the menus have changed across the top. This is where we go and start putting parts together. Now I created those all kind of lined up together, and they are when I bring them in to the assembly. But also in the assembly, I can come in here and start to manipulate geometry, right? So I can create different types of joints and things like that if I have an assembly that needs to articulate. Now let's talk a little bit, now that we have an assembly, now we can start talking bills of materials. You notice that over here, we have a listing of the parts, and no longer do we have the features anymore. This is at a higher level. We're looking at everything here. So the bill of material is right here. It pops out. We can have different columns here. You'll notice also that it's saying flattened. So flattened just means that of this little assembly that we're dealing with, it's only going to show me the individual parts. If I had sub-assemblies in here, it wouldn't show me those. In this case, they're just individual parts, so a flattened version of this is fine. You notice that there are a variety of different columns here, and I can go in and add my own column. Again, this is a kind of a user-defined list of all the different type of attributes that we might want to have displayed in our bill of material. The thing is that this bill of material, the way that I structure it here, is the way that it will be in the drawing. So I don't create it in the drawing, I don't manipulate it in the drawing, it's all created and set up here, and then in the drawing, I just place the bill of material. One of the things that we deal with when we're talking with customers, and they'll say, okay, we were gonna bring all our information into Onshape. The thing is that we have maybe a couple of different groups, or we've just recently purchased another company, and we have parts that have the same name, but they're different. And we know that Onshape kind of does data management as well as part management or part creation. It's all built into one. And so what's going to happen? What's Onshape going to do with that? We might have 2 parts that have the same name and they're totally different. And the thing is, there's nothing to worry about that with Onshape. Here are the names of these parts. In this case, they all happen to be unique names, but I could have renamed these all cylinder or renamed them all bolt, and Onshape couldn't care less. The uniqueness that comes with components is right here with the part number. So Onshape has a built-in release management system, a workflow. And at that point, we can assign part numbers to our components, and that is when they get the unique names. So you notice that one of the components here has a part number, and this is an O-ring that we purchased from a company, so we're just using their part number. But I want to use our part numbers, and the part numbering scheme is customizable, and it's automatic. So in this particular case, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say generate missing part numbers. When I do that, it's automatically created the part numbers for the parts that didn't have a part number. Now they are unique. As far as Onshape goes, they have a unique number, they are unique parts. So that's kind of one of the things, if you ever have to wrestle with that idea of we might have duplicate names. Now it would be in your best benefit to make sure that parts have unique names, but it won't stop you from moving into Onshape. So with this, let's kind of move into something a little bit more interesting than our clamp here. So I'm going to look at this assembly that we have here. We're using our clamp. We can see that we've brought that in multiple times. We've got some little hoist rings. We've got a plate, big casting, and this is what we want to start working with in terms of a bill of material. And we'll look into it a little bit more. So again, the same icon over here. I click that, it opens up our BOM. We can see the different components. You notice it's saying flattened here, and it's just listing the individual parts that are there and not the sub-assembly. So I'm going to change this and say structured. And now it brings in the other sub-assembly. So we have these hoists over here in the corner, hoist rings, and then we've got the clamps that we brought in. There's 8 of those, as we can see. I want to kind of customize this a little bit. So one of the things I could do is say, let's add a column. And let's add a column as the state of these parts, right? And the state is going to say, are they released? Are they in progress? So we're doing that. So you notice that some of these parts are released. They've gone through the process and they have their part numbers. Going through the release process, you have to give them part numbers. And then these other components don't. And maybe for this quantity, I could select on this column and say, let's move it to the right because we want it to be over there. So I can add different columns and rearrange them the way that we want. Remember that this is going to be the bill of material that we're going to use in our drawing. So now that I have this set up the way that I want, I'm going to come over here and say, let's call up the drawing for this particular component. So really all I did is I just took a piece of paper and placed an isometric view in the drawing view. So we have that set here. And what I want to do now is place the bill of material. So I'm going to say, let's update this just to make sure everything is right. That's one of the nice things that Onshape will do is if any of the components change, this little button up here indicates that something has changed. You click that and it refreshes it, make sure that everything is up to date. So I want to place our bill of material. It's a button right here. I'm going to select on that and it says what kind of bill of material you want. And I'm going to say, remember flatten just shows me just the kind of top level parts. So I'm going to say, let's show me the structured bill of material. And then where do we want it to be anchored? By default, it's kind of in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to say in the lower left. And it attaches it to my mouse. And you notice that here, I can just place it lower left, and we'll kind of snap it in to the corner here. So now we can see our components and our bill of material. Again, this is exactly the same bill of material that we had set up in the assembly earlier. And now we can start going in and placing some callouts. So I'm going to really kind of stress the word callout as opposed to balloons. And we'll see that as we explore this a little bit. So to do that, I'm going to come over here and say, let's place a callout. It's going to say, let's take an item number. It's going to make it a circle. And I can just pick on the plate. It's item number 2. I can pick on our casting, item number 1. We can see it's tied back here. So in technical terms, this would be ballooning, right? But this callout can do more than just balloons. Again, I could do all the other components like this as well, but I want to kind of highlight some of the differences about this. So let's go back in here again. I have the same menu, but this time I'm going to come in here and say instead of a circle, let's use all these different shapes. I'm going to say let's just use an underline. And we're going to also say before the item number, I'm going to type in the word item. And the reason being is that it's just going to have a number there and it's underlined, it's not circled like this. It might be a little bit more harder to understand. And maybe over here, I'm going to add in quantity. And I'll say quantity times 1. So at this point, I can come over here. Let's grab this guy, place it over here, and we can see it's saying item 1 or item 3 with 4 of those. So that represents our hoist ring. So again, we can kind of customize this. The reason I typed in the word item is because there'd just be a number 3 over here, and it wouldn't really necessarily be obvious that it's referring to item number 3 over here. So let's go over and kind of create another call out. In this case, I'm going to say we've got the quantity here, we've got that. Maybe I want to add something down below. So I'm going to go down here and say, let's add the part number as well. So now we'll have an underline with quantity and part number, and we'll come over here and maybe pick on the clamp that we have and place this over here. Now we can see that we have 8 of those clamps, and we have those with the part number as well associated with that. And we can see the part number right there. So you can see these callouts are pretty powerful. Now, everything that I've been doing up until this point has been pulling out information from one of these columns. You notice that when I was going in here and going into our callout, I was pulling from this menu right here. So I'm going to go in and kind of make some changes here. I'm going to say, let's delete this, delete that stuff, get rid of this, and get rid of our part number as well. What I want to place here now in the middle, I want to use this column over here. These are part properties. So whichever part I pick on, it'll pull out information from the part and not from the assembly. So over here, I could say, let's just pull out the part's name. I'll come over here and we'll say, let's zoom in. Let's zoom in on maybe like this bolt right there. So he's got some big old name. We'll place him right here. Or I could say, remember our cylinder that we had over here. I could say, let's take him and place him right there. And again, maybe with something like this, I might want to also add the part number below it. If I wanted to do that, I could just, anytime you want, you can double click on something and then say maybe down below, I want to place the part number. Oh, and that guy didn't have a part number. I thought he would. So as you can see, it's really easy for us to go in and create these callouts, not just the ballooning like you can in every other CAD system, but we can pull out all kinds of other information. It's really easy to customize, really easy to edit, and it give you all kinds of useful information, and not just necessarily the things that we see in our bill of material, but then also, as we saw over here, characteristics. I could pull out the material of this particular component or a variety of other things. It's all available for me to do that. But this is kind of a quick overview of bills of materials and how Onshape deals with them. With that, I think I'm going to turn this back over to Sierra. And if you do have any questions, type them in, please.